the architecture of GPT-3 and how to think about it in the year 2023.
You are programming with Palermo. You deliver software. You need to move fast, deliver quality, and run your software with confidence. Stay tuned for timeless solutions, simple methods, and topics that will propel you forward. And now your host, lifelong programmer, author, teacher, coach, Christian, and charismatic speaker, Jeffrey Palermo.
Welcome back to Programming with Palermo. I'm your host, Jeffrey Palermo, and today we are going to take a look at the architecture of GPT-3, which is the machine learning technology behind ChatGPT that lots and lots of people have been talking about and trying out. And we're going to dig into it because, after all, we are programmers. We're working on software. This is a piece of software, a very interesting piece of software. And I want to talk through that so we can understand whether or not and how to either integrate it with our software systems or perhaps stand up our own instance of it for use in our software systems. So let's get into it. GPT-3. That stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer 3. And it's the latest language generation AI model developed by OpenAI. And it's one of the largest AI models with over 175 billion parameters that go into it. And it's also, it's been trained on just a massive amount of text data. GPT-3 can generate human-like text in a variety of styles and formats, making it a pretty powerful tool for natural language processing. And that's where you'll see the NLP acronym. And of course, you've seen ChatGPT, but it's using the GPT-3 engine. And you can use it for tasks like text completion, text summarization, and machine translation, even between languages. But let's talk about the architecture of GPT-3. All right, GPT-3, the architecture is based on the Transformer network, and Transformer capitalized, and that was introduced in 2017 by a Mr. Vaswani, and they had a paper, Attention is All You Need, and we'll link to that paper in the show notes. The Transformer network is a type of neural network that's pretty well suited to NLP tasks due to its ability to process sequences of variable length. I know that's kind of research speak jargon, but the GPT-3 model consists of multiple layers, and each of it is containing attention and feed-forward neural networks. The attention mechanism allows the model to focus on different parts of the input text, which is useful for understanding the context and generating text that's coherent and relevant to the input. The feed-forward neural network is responsible for processing the information from the attention mechanism and generating the output. Now, stay with me. The output of one layer is used as the input to the next layer, allowing the model to build on its understanding of the input text and generate more complex and sophisticated text as it goes along.
Programming with Palermo is brought to you by ClearMeasure, a software architecture company that empowers .NET teams to be self-sufficient, moving fast, delivering quality, and running their software with confidence in Azure. If your team has a project that's too important to be delayed or derailed, ClearMeasure can help, while keeping your team in the driver's seat and growing in capability. Click on clearmeasure.com for more information. If you are an architect or .NET engineer aspiring to become an architect, check out clearmeasure.com/careers. Now, back to the show.
Now, you can use GPT-3 in a C# application. To use it, you'll need to access the OpenAI API, which provides access to the GPT-3 model, and you'll need to create an account with OpenAI and then obtain an API key to use the service. You can see the code here on the screen. And once you have access to the API, you can use it to generate text by sending a prompt or starting text to the API. And the API will then generate text based on the input and return the output to your application. To use the API in C#, you can use the HTTP client class to send a request to the API and receive a response. The code here on the screen demonstrates how to request to the API and receive the generated text. You'll see on line 15, I'm sending it the prompt, write a blog post about the architecture of GPT-3. All right, let that sink in. From the start of this explanation, the text was actually generated by chat.openai.com. And it can be pretty impressive, but at the same time, it's pretty shallow and jargony. I was literally reading the text, and as I'll scroll up, this is literally what I put into it. Let's see. Yeah, just the basics. What does it stand for? Write a blog post on the architecture. And then that was the text that I was reading. But it's kind of shallow, lots of jargon, but let me give you my interpretation of it. GPT-3 is a machine learning model that's been trained with selected information up to 2021. And we can see down at the bottom, who's playing in the Super Bowl? Well, it doesn't know. It was trained up to 2021. There's lots of information, but it's selected nonetheless, and it has to be fed in. Now here, this literally is chat.openai.com. This is the page, and it kind of admits that it doesn't have the information past 2021. But let's dig deeper. Let's dig deeper on what GPT-3 is and how it came to be. Let's look at the theory behind it so that we can see if we should use it as an architectural element on our own software. So let's kind of go back to 2017. 2017, and make this a little bit larger. Ashish Vaswani and 7 other contributors wrote a paper. They called it, quote, "Attention is all you need." And in it, they proposed a new network architecture for their neural network. This is all about machine learning. So if you haven't even touched on machine learning, I mean, Microsoft has been talking about it in conferences for many years now. That's the kind of sphere that this is operating in. But in the article, they proposed this new architecture. So simply put, think of it as a specially trained machine learning model, but a new mechanism for training it. They created that method where they could significantly train the model in 3.5 days using a computer with only 8 GPUs. These are graphic processing units, faster than CPUs. But that's not a massive supercomputer. So 3.5 days. And they made it ready for complete translation from one spoken language to another. And then they tested it using an English to French translation and a English to German translation test. Vaswani and other contributors were from Google Brain. There were 4 from Google Research and 1 from the University of Toronto. Now, going further, in 2018, there was another paper, and this one was from OpenAI. And 4 engineers from OpenAI wrote the paper, Improving Language Understanding by Generative Pre-Training. And they lean on Vaswani's paper and dozens of others. The bibliography is quite long. And they came up with a new method for natural language processing. This is that NLP acronym, if you're not familiar with it. So they described the problem of training a model with raw text and unlabeled documents. And that is, if a model is trained by literally all of the information that's just available out there in the world, it's an absolute mess. Ultimately, cultures divide the world, and all queries posed to a machine learning model are in the context of culture. We have geographic culture, we have national culture, religious culture, trade culture for certain jobs, and existing models have to painstakingly label all the data before being fed into a model, or they get mixed in with everything else. For example, take users in different countries as a stark example. In the US, where 70% of the population claims Christianity as their religion, according to the 2020 religion survey, if users receive answers condemning Christianity or criticizing it, that'd be a poor user experience for that region. In Afghanistan, however, where it's illegal to be Christian, the users would have a very poor experience if the model returned answers showing Christianity in a positive light. So, from an architectural perspective, it's important to understand what GPT-3 is and how it's used. The pre-training is super, super important. You select what goes into it, and then that governs the answers. And that's appropriate for a lot of software. So again, it stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer 3. So pre-training is important when you're using it in your software. And there's several online services that have implemented GPT-3 and have trained a model. You can literally subscribe to and pay for services to do text drafting and copy editing. Those are already becoming popular. Video editing and video creation is becoming popular and growing. But understand that by taking a dependency to one of these online services, you're basically relying on them to train a model for you. And that alone is a lot of work that could save you a lot of time. But make sure that you inquire about the body of data that's being fed into that model, so that you can make sure that your users receive the experience that you want for them. I gave one example of cultural differences between countries, but for software geared for children, by the way, there's a mountain of information on the internet that you do not want to be in the model if it's generating responses for kids. Keep that in mind. ChatGPT has had to have bias injected into it because bias seems to be a more human trait than a computer trait. Time Magazine did a write-up, an article on how OpenAI actually invested in a project to label and filter data used to train the model. And in short, it was a really big filtering operation. There's lots of information out there on the net, lots of filth on the net. So they wanted to kind of keep that out. It was generating responses that they absolutely did not want it to generate. So they had to do a project to kind of curate and label the information that was being filtered onto it. You're going to want to make sure that you train your models according to your own morality or bias. Again, morality is another word for bias. So if there's information out there you consider toxic, well, that's a value statement. That's a morality statement. Certainly, we can all agree on graphic depictions of people being murdered is not probably something that you want, in your model, but it's out there on the net. So you need to decide what information goes in. And you're going to find some areas where, ChatGPT, for example, inserted bias that you don't agree with because they're labeling data. But again, it's all about training the model with labeled data that fits the culture of the users. And, early users are circulating some answers that seem fishy and serve as examples of, the filtering project that OpenAI commissioned. ChatGPT can draft blog posts. They can draft the blog posts like I drafted here, and short statements as well. And that's pretty cool. I did an experiment. Actually, I pulled up an experiment that was being around. And for example, I am Italian, and my family immigrated from Sicily in 1910 to Texas. So I love this first example. I just put in, write a tweet admiring Italians, and the response is, Italians are a true inspiration. Their rich culture, stunning architecture, delicious cuisine, and effortless style make them a marvel to admire. That's pretty cool. Quite flattering. And then you just go down the list and throw in some other races, and the trainers of ChatGPT, they modeled and labeled data, favorable to Italians and Asians and Hispanics and Indians and blacks and whites, and but it seems to have a problem with the last one. So we can see that the model definitely has some different training there. So architecturally, you need to decide whether a third-party model out there is a fit for your software, or whether you need to train a model that fits your users more specifically. But let's move on. OpenAI is very well capitalized, and I expect to some interesting things from them. Microsoft, since 2019, they've invested $1 billion into the company. And with an investment like that, I would also expect OpenAI technology to be well integrated into Microsoft Azure and .NET development tools. Microsoft has been expanding machine learning capabilities for a long time, but GPT-3 is pretty groundbreaking. You can train models like the ChatGPT sample. You can train those in 4 days with a computer with only 8 GPUs and be ready to start testing. And for some of you, you'll just want to call the HTTP APIs of some of the Chat GPT-3 services. And for others, you'll want to implement and train your own model so that you can label the data that's being fed in to guide the responses. It's pretty easy to integrate, and more commercial services are coming online. Now, let me talk about an elephant in the room. And there's lots of naysayers coming around saying, is GPT-3 going to replace me as a programmer? Well, the short answer is no. I've been around long enough to have seen every decade have a story of, this technology is going to make programmers obsolete. And it hasn't happened, and it's not going to happen. The same thing can be said about automobile mechanics. Even if every single car and truck out there converted to electric or hydrogen or whatever technology, we'll still need mechanics to fix them and perform maintenance on them. Things change, but they don't go away. The developers of the 90s, when the web was coming out, there were some developers that considered and marketed themselves as HTML programmers when the web was first, and it was just static HTML content. So they marketed themselves as HTML programmers. They've had to change dramatically because just HTML programmers, that had a kind of short run where people were hiring someone as an HTML programmer. And now HTML is just a small portion of the skill set, and cascading style sheets has radically changed HTML programming. And then, of course, Bootstrap and Material and the other CSS frameworks have radically changed it again. And so the tools and how we use them will keep changing. But the need for people to design and implement and operate and maintain software is still going to be there. But it's certainly an exciting time to be a programmer. Absolutely. So right now, even if your current software wouldn't benefit from the use of a GPT-3 model, you should add it to your tool belt for you or your colleagues. For example, there's so many questions that we go to Stack Overflow or web search for, or perhaps your users of some analytics database need help with a query. Now you have tools to help you draft that syntax. And so one of the things that you can do is, as you see right here on the screen, you can literally ask it to create a query for all customers in Texas who have spent over $5,000, and it will generate a query. And the syntax, most of the time it's right. Okay. So it's really, really interesting. If you haven't looked into GPT-3, you'll want to. It is a big leap ahead in the field of machine learning, and its capabilities can be a component that's part of your artificial intelligence solution, or maybe just a part of an existing software system. I'd encourage you to read the research papers that describe it in more detail so that you know how it's designed. We'll include links in the show notes. And after all, it's just software. You need to understand the capabilities of this. This is basically new software component so that you can choose how to use it to your benefit. There's nothing magical about it. It's just software, and just like every other library and API service that you currently use to do something. It's just software. So I hope this has aided you in up-leveling your understanding of GPT-3 and how to best use it in your own software. Thank you for being here with me on Programming with Palermo. Again, I'm Jeffrey Palermo, your host. If you have not tried out any of the OpenAI samples or ChatGPT or any of the other GPT-3 powered services that are out there on the net, there's literally several dozen of these online services that kind of use this core technology and this shared model that they have pumped just tons of data into that can do some impressive things. And as always, try it out with the code, integrate it with the API, and then see if it makes sense for maybe your knowledge base to be pumped into a GPT-3 model or some other pool of information that you have that is not public information online, but your business has. Perhaps it's useful to train a model and then um, create this type of technology and unleash it in your business. So, hope this helps. And thank you for programming with Palermo. God bless.
You've been watching Programming with Palermo, your primary place for highly productive programming protocols and practices. Remember, you have what it takes. You can do this. You are a programmer, formed by God Himself and called to this profession for a purpose. You can catch every episode at palermo.network as well as syndicated locations nationwide. We're so glad you tuned in. Until next time, may God bless you, and thanks for programming with Palermo. Programming with Palermo has made a special arrangement with Marketplace Chaplains. Besides programming challenges, we all face issues in life where we need some help. If you'd like, you can call a chaplain confidentially. To speak with a gentleman, dial 512-923-8178. Or to speak with a lady, dial 512-619-6950. The show won't know you called, and everything is kept in strict secrecy. This is a free service available if you or a friend need it.